Well, in that case, we are ready to call the meeting of the Willits City Council dated May 12th to order at 6:30. So, Kathy, would you like to please lead us in the pledge and then do the roll call, please?
I will, thank you. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Roll call. Councilmember Gonzalez.
Awesome.
Connie.
Present.
Stransky.
Yes.
Rodriguez. Councilmember Rodriguez.
You're muted,
I
Sabrina.
see her, but I don't, she's not on. Mayor Strong.
Here. So was Sabrina temporarily not there?
No,
Did she
she's
respond?
on the line, but she's must have stepped away.
Okay. Okay. All right. At the beginning of the meeting, open to public communications, and we welcome comments from anyone who would like to speak to us on items that are not on the posted agenda, and with a 3-minute limit, and we accept any kinds of criticisms on any matter that is under our jurisdiction, but no action is taken on things that come up in public discussion, public communications. They would have to be posted for an agenda at some other later time. Are there any members of the public who would like to speak to the City Council? I am not hearing anybody. So we will move on. The next item on our agenda is public matters. We have a presentation of a proclamation recognizing National Police Week, which we are already in the middle of right now. And I have a proclamation that I would like to read, and then we could have our police chief say a few words. So the proclamation, should I get in front of me? I don't know how this happens. Where did it go? I had it up in front of me just a second ago. Okay, there it is. Whereas, to honor the service and sacrifice of those law enforcement officers who have died in the line of duty while protecting our communities and safeguarding our democracy, and whereas there are more than 800,000 law enforcement officers serving in communities across the United States, including the dedicated members of the Willits Police Department, and whereas there were 56,034 assaults against law enforcement officers during 2019, resulting in approximately 17,188 injuries. Whereas since the first recorded death in 1786, more than 22,600 law enforcement officers in the United States have made the ultimate sacrifice and died in the line of duty. Whereas the names of these dedicated public servants are engraved on the walls of the National Law Enforcement Officers Memorial in Washington, D.C., and 394 new names of fallen heroes are being added to the National Law Enforcement Officers Memorial this spring, including 295 officers who died in 2020 and 99 officers who died in previous years. Whereas year-to-date in 2021, there have been 77 officers killed in the line of duty across the country, with 7 of them occurring in California. Whereas the service and sacrifice of all officers who died in the line of duty will be honored during the National Law Enforcement Officers Memorial Fund's 33rd Annual Candlelight Vigil on the evening of May 13th, which is tomorrow. Whereas the annual Candlelight Vigil is part of National Police Week, which takes place this week from May 9th to 15th, whereas May 15th is designated as Police Officers Memorial Day in honor of all fallen officers and their families, and U.S. flags should be flown at half-staff. Therefore, be it resolved that the Willits City Council formally designates this week, May 9th to 15th, as Police Week in the city of Willits, and publicly salutes the service of law enforcement officers in our community and in communities across the nation. Therefore, now I, Mayor Matt Strong, along with Vice Mayor Sabrina Rodriguez and Council Members Larry Stransky, Greta Connie, and Gerardo Gonzalez, do hereby proclaim National Police Week 2021. Thank you. Chief Lizarraga, would you like to say a few words in receiving this?
Yes, ma'am, and thank you all very much for the proclamation. It really does mean a lot to our officers here in Willits, knowing that people recognize the sacrifices that some of our brethren across the country make. Unfortunately, we cited the death toll in California being at 7. Unfortunately, yesterday we lost 2 more. One in San Luis Obispo and the other one in Stockton. Both killed in the line of duty by gunfire. And it just continues to, unfortunately, roll on. So we very much appreciate not only the support of the council, but what we feel from the community in their support, in their positive feelings towards our officers here. Not every town in California or across the country can say that about their communities, but we are certainly proud to be able to say that about ours here in Willits. So thank you very much on behalf of the men and women here at the Willits Police Department, and we will make sure that everybody sees it and that it's properly displayed here in the station. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief. Yeah, those pretty sobering statistics, and we hope to never have to face that in our own community. Any other? Thank you very much for your service and for those on your force. We are moving to item 3B, a discussion of possible action to introduce and waive the first reading of an ordinance to establish a fire impact fee program for the Little Lake Fire Protection District. And I imagine Chris Wilkes would like to speak to that. Chris?
Yeah, I'm on the line. Thank you for having this again, and it looks like Blair is also on here, who's our consultant that put together the impact fee, the Nexus study. And we look forward to having this on the agenda again tonight. Thank you very much. And, looking forward to hearing any comments from the council and how we can move forward.
For the benefit of the public, if you are here and weren't here at the last meeting, we did go through the study and the fee recommendations that came out of that study. So we probably won't repeat all of that, but if Blair would like to add anything, please do.
I would. Thank you, Mayor Strong, members of the council. Again, my name is Blair Oz. I'm with SCI Consulting Group, and I'm the impact fee consultant for the Little Lake Fire Protection District. So the first reading of the ordinance before you this evening, again, at the last council meeting, we gave a thorough presentation on the proposed development impact fee program for the Little Lake Fire Protection District. And also at that meeting, as required by the Mitigation Fee Act that governs these types of fees, the council held a noticed public hearing as well. So the action tonight is the first reading of the ordinance that we helped draft for the city. And if I may, I'll just take just a few moments to outline that ordinance. Again, the ordinance, the most important part of the ordinance is that it establishes the fee program. It enables the Little Lake Fire Protection District to collect these fees under your land use authority. And then the ordinance also sets forth the requirements for the annual administration of the fee program as well. And that as part of that, we are recommending, and it's in the ordinance that, and this is pretty typical, that the fire district and the city just enter into a simple collection agreement, an administration agreement. So it spells it because the district is proposing that they will be responsible for collecting the fee, accounting for the fee, reporting the fee, but there is some work to do with the city as well because it's being imposed under your land use authority. And so that agreement would specify some of those administration relationships, as well as importantly, it indemnifies the city for as well for imposing the fee on behalf of the district. And working with Jim Lance, I wanted to highlight that he made a couple recommendations to revisions to the ordinance that's in your packet. First, in the ordinance it made reference to the nexus study, that it does establish the legal and policy basis for imposing the fee, but it made reference to it being attached to the ordinance. And Mr. Lance had recommended, and we concur, that probably just referencing the study itself is sufficient rather than actually having it as an attachment to the ordinance. So we're making that suggested change. And then also he did catch that, as I'd indicated earlier, that the proposal is for the district to collect the fee. The city would impose the fee, but that they would be actually physically collected by the district. But for the city's efforts, that there's a 4% administration fee that's part of the fee program, and that in the ordinance it had referenced that the city would retain 2% of that fee. In fact, if the district is actually collecting it, they would have to remit 2% to the city. So we'll make that change. And then Jim also did highlight a couple typos that we will correct as well. But outside that, that's the ordinance in summary before you this evening.
I'd like to just clarify, if I might, that for anyone who wasn't here last time, this fee would be on new development, and it would be dedicated to expanding either equipment or facilities to provide for such new development. It isn't going to be a fee on everybody who's already got their own buildings and residences here in the city. So it's only a fee on new development that then requires that the fire department has to perhaps expand their facilities to meet that increased demand. Is that correct?
That is correct, Mayor Strong. Very well said.
Thank you. Just want to make sure everybody understood that. So are there any questions from the council members to clarify anything? Otherwise, I believe we open the public hearing on this item. And I don't see any questions from council members. So we now are opening the public hearing on item 3A, the first reading, or waiving the first reading of the proposed ordinance on a fire impact fee. Any members of the public wish? Yes, caller. I see caller 12. I don't know who you are. Could you state your name and you can go ahead with your comment? If you're there. We aren't hearing you. I don't know if that's because you decided not to speak.
Madge, if somebody's calling in, they wouldn't know if they're caller 2, 10, or 12.
Yeah, what I am identifying is that there was a little blip of sound coming from one of the callers. And if you wish to speak, please go ahead and speak loudly and state your name and make your comments. So this is your moment. Not hearing any comments. So with that, I will close the public hearing and bring it back up to the council for a motion, if you'd like. Someone to make a motion?
I so moved. This is Larry.
Okay, Larry, and it looks like Jerry Gonzalez has seconded the motion. So we have a motion and a second, and I believe Kathy will do the roll call. This is to approve the first reading of the ordinance.
Thank you. Councilmember.
Actually, to approve the introduction and waive the first.
Waive the first
That's
reading.
correct. Yes. Thank you.
Councilmember Gonzalez,
Yes.
Connie,
Yes.
Stransky,
Yes.
Rodriguez,
Yes.
Mayor Strong.
Yes.
Thank you.
Right. Thank you.
Email.
Moving along, there's no ordinances other than this one that we just dealt with. And we are now on the consent calendar. There are 3 items there. The City Council minutes of April 28th, approving a budget revision to include Public Works Director classification effective May 13th, and approve a resolution for the revised classification and compensation schedule. And this approval confirms the appointment of Scott Herman as Public Works Director. And the third item in the consent calendar is a resolution authorizing the purchase of a 2022 Chevrolet Silverado 1500 4x4 pickup truck with camper shell for the engineering department for the state contract pricing of $35,137.78, and authorize city manager to execute the purchasing documents. Do any council members have any questions or want to pull any item?
I don't necessarily want to pull it. I just want to acknowledge that Scott Herman and his dedication to the city, and I am pleased that he's willing to take this on. He serves our community well, and I think he'll continue to serve our community. So I just want to publicly state that. And I will motion to accept the consent calendar.
I second it. Larry.
Thank you, Larry. Greta?
Mayor Strong, do we need
Yes.
to approve any of these items that deal with dollar amounts and approve those separately?
I believe that those dollar amounts do not exceed what we can do by consent calendar. Maybe Brian or Jim can confirm that. I think these are below the threshold of requiring separate action, but I don't know. Brian?
Jim, if you're speaking, you're muted.
I believe we can proceed.
Okay. Before we vote on this, I think I open to any public comments on any of these items on consent calendar. We should have done that before the motion and the second, but if anyone wishes to address us, and I'm not hearing any. So, and I would also like to echo what Councilmember Gonzalez said. I think it's just very exciting to have Scott Herman in as our Public Works Director. We've needed someone to kind of put the pieces, the puzzle pieces together and see the big picture, and I think we're really going to benefit from having Scott Herman taking on that role. Congratulate him for moving up, taking it on. Greta?
And Scott, I don't want to make you blush, but I did hear from a couple of your coworkers who reached out to me to tell me that they approved of you accepting this position, and they're very excited. So they wanted council to know that they've given you the stamp of approval.
Well, thank you guys very much for the opportunity.
That's great. Okay. So without any further ado, I think we had a motion and a second. So Kathy, would you do the roll call on this consent calendar?
Yes.
These three items.
Councilmember Gonzalez,
Yes.
Connie,
Yes.
Stransky,
Yes.
Rodriguez,
Yes.
Mayor Strong.
Yes. All right. There are not informational reports on this agenda. Sorry, I'll get rid of that very quickly. Sorry about that. Since my phone is right here next to my computer, I can't completely ignore it. Otherwise, we would hear the message machine going on and all that stuff. So, going on, we do not have any separate commission agenda items. We are now going to the city manager's reports and recommendations. Brian Bender.
Thank you. Good evening, City Council. Just briefly, I think we had the acknowledgement of Scott Herman. Once again, I just want to applaud his commitment to the city and his willingness to take on this position. It's going to be an honor to work with him. His knowledge on the city and the city infrastructure and where staff is on these projects, I know it's going to be very helpful to me, and ultimately it's going to be a great situation for the city to benefit from a gentleman of that caliber in that position. And equally, I want to call out Chief Lizarok. We went through that hiring process, and we had a very elaborate process viewing himself and another candidate that was presented to us by Joel Bryden of Bob Murray and Associates. It was through both internal and external panel reviews, comments, and a breakdown of the strengths of each of the candidates. I'm glad that we were able to secure the services of Chief Lizaraga for this community. I think he's a great fit. He's going to bring a lot of effort to this position, and that department is going to benefit from his leadership and guidance and wisdom. So once again, two great additions to this team, and looking forward to great things in the future.
Yes. Welcome as our permanent chief, Chief Lizaraga.
Thank you all. Thank you for the opportunity. I'm looking forward to the challenge here.
Great.
That is what I have for tonight, and I appreciate your assistance.
Brian, in our weekly update, you did do a little bit of update on the coronavirus situation. Is there anything that the public might want to hear about that, or is it pretty much?
The city managers had our briefing this morning with Dr. Corrin at County Health. It's steady as she goes type of perspective. We're still in yellow tier. Dr. Corrin and his staff are approving events throughout the county. We're looking at 2 events that are going to be held within the city here that kind of are going to be test cases to make sure that protocols are effective and that these type of events can be held from this point on. There's still a little bit of uncertainty. There's still the word of advice that is coming from Dr. Corrin and his staff is that I think everyone still has to use an element of common sense. If you feel unsafe in a certain location or setting, don't put yourself at risk. Still use social distancing protocols, wear masks in mixed settings as well, not only for yourself, but also for the community at large. But the next date on the horizon is what's going to happen on June 15th. June 15th, the consensus is that the blueprint for opening that designates those tiers would eventually be sunsetted, and we're looking at a new set of guidelines from CDC, then passed down to the state, and then ultimately to the county. Hopefully there is no events that, push us backwards. No one wants that to happen right on the cusp of the summer activities. So that is what I have. Everyone is still hoping that, some events can take off in a more managed perspective and scale, and that vaccination rates are pretty high within the county. I think it's close to 70,000 individuals who are eligible within Mendocino County to receive vaccination, which is higher than the state average. We do lag behind in average vaccination rates for 18 to 48-year-olds, and then that's a little bit concerning because that would be the heart of the working population, where they would have the most exposure to the general public. So that's something that county health officials are looking to address.
Thank you. Any questions? Any questions for our city manager, Bender? Any comments from the public? And then we will move on to I'm very excited to hear this report, an overview of the city's water infrastructure and proposed improvements. And this will be presented by our city engineer, Rod Wilburn, and Public Works Director, Scott Herman. So I think, Rod, you want to go first?
I would be very happy to. Thank you, Mayor Strong, evening council members. I would be remiss if I didn't pile on and congratulate Scott Herman on his new position and his promotion. Having worked with Scott for a very long time, the city is very fortunate to have him in this role, and I know he's going to do an excellent job. So, Scott and I have conversed over the last couple of days and went back and forth on rather brief overview, but an overview of the city system. And we're going to talk about where the system sits currently, and we have a slide showing some well locations, and we'll provide some data from the last couple of years on usage, as well as talk about the current groundwater project. So, and then we'll open it up for questions and answers. But if anybody has a question, feel free to interrupt. And
Ron?
Yes.
Just one thought is, I'm not sure if those who have joined us only by phone probably will not see the slides, so try to make your comments, state the things that are on the slide that people wouldn't otherwise know.
As descriptive as possible.
Okay, thank you.
And I just want to explain to the council and to the general public who are listening via the phone, we will post this on our website tomorrow or Friday for public access as well.
And there will definitely be public questions and comments after the presentation. Thank you.
Yes.
Go ahead.
Okay. Next slide, please, Catherine. So the current system status, the reservoirs are at 93% of capacity, which is approximately 1,220 acre-feet of storage. Centennial is full and spilling over. Morris is probably going to come up a little bit. Scott told me today that it'll probably actually increase a couple percentage points over the next week or so. The Elias well, we're monitoring. That's the only well that's connected to the groundwater system that's connected to the city's distribution system, and the current groundwater level is at the Elias well is 3.2 feet above the ground surface. So it's still artesianing, and it did so late into the summer last year. The other well, the Long 20 test well, which is, we'll see a slide in the next slide will give us the location. It is not connected to the groundwater system. It doesn't have a pump, nor does it have any power to the well. And the third well that the city owns and operates is the Park Well, which is currently being used to irrigate the rec grove. It irrigates the ball fields, and it also supplies water for the truck fill station. It's also being used to water the trees downtown. Thank you, Kathy. So this, if you can see this slide here, this shows the location of the wells, and so from the north, it's approximately where the bypass connects back in, where the tracks used to cross 101, to due east of that, and that's the Elias replacement well. Imagine I couldn't find an updated aerial image for this, but before this is over, we're going to get one and have this show the current state of the valley. So just to the south of that is the Long 20 test well. That's between the Elias well and the enhancement wetlands for the wastewater treatment plant. And you'll see that blue line is the 3,600 feet of pipe that's currently 6-inch Schedule 40 PVC that was installed originally for irrigation, and that's scheduled for replacement. I'm kind of getting into the next slide here. Scheduled for replacement as part of this project. That was what the grant that the city received is for $550,000 to replace that water main. And moving to the south, the groundwater treatment plant is just to the west of the wastewater treatment plant, and construction of that was completed in 2015. And moving to the south, you'll see the Park Well. That's the lay of, that's how things are. The Elias replacement well is about a mile, a little over a mile north of the groundwater treatment plant. So next slide, please. Just to the title thing. There. Okay. So these are the primary components of the proposed groundwater project. Like I stated earlier, replacement of that 3,600 feet of water main between the Elias well and the enhancement wetlands, connecting the Long 20 test well to the groundwater system. That includes installation of a pump and controls for the well system, and as well as getting power to the wellhead. And finally, the installation of a 200,000 gallon clear well at the groundwater treatment plant, which will allow for some chlorine contact time. It will potentially allow for some mixing. There have been some customers notice the difference between groundwater and surface water. So it's not that the water quality is still very good. It's just different. So we may look. We've talked about potentially mixing at this tank with some surface water if possible, and it also allows for pressure control. Right now, the way the system works is there's a pump at the Elias well. Like I said, it's about a mile north of the groundwater treatment plant, and it pumps from there through the groundwater treatment plant into the distribution system against the lowest point in the distribution system. So we're looking to be able to control that pressure a little bit and maybe get a little more pressure as needed. So next slide, please. And so this is looking at the last 2 years of water usage. There's more data, but this gives us an idea of the current usage, the production of water by the different plants. For the surface water treatment plant in 2019, it produced 269 million gallons, which equates to 827 acre feet. And the reason we convert to acre feet is at the bottom of this slide. When we get into the capacity, the storage capacity for the Little Lake Valley, it's typically communicated in acre feet because the numbers of millions of gallons is tremendous. So 2020, just a little slightly less, 261.5 million gallons, or 802 acre feet. For the groundwater treatment plant in 2019, there were 13 million gallons used, and it was primarily used during flushing of the distribution system, which is an essential, very important part of maintaining water quality, and flushing all the stuff that builds up in the pipes over time. And 2020, there was no usage of the groundwater treatment plant. There were some treatment issues that had to be resolved, and it wasn't needed. So, and the third well, the Park well, 2019, there were 1.1 million gallons were sold, and in 2020, 8 million gallons were sold. And important to point out that revenue goes towards park expenses. That was the purpose. The primary purpose in the beginning was to help pay for some of those expenses associated with equipment and upkeep on the bathrooms, etc. It was essentially an unfunded, responsibility. So, lastly, these are some estimates. I know there are other estimates I couldn't find. These are some estimates of the storage capacity, the Little Lake Valley. Cardwell in 1965 estimated 50,000 acre feet, between 10 and 100 feet in depth. So down to 100 feet below the ground surface, they estimated 50,000 acre feet. DWR in the same year estimated 91,600 acre feet, between 10 feet in depth and 200 feet. And finally, the 1986 number, Farrar estimated 35,000 acre feet, down to 100 feet. So if you the difference there in the number of I try to convert that number of acre feet to millions of gallons. It's a huge number. So that's really, albeit brief, that's the overview of the current status in the proposed project. So Scott, did you have anything you wanted to add to that?
No, I think you summed it up great in the slide presentation, Rod. I think if there's anything, questions to be asked, I'd be happy to answer some.
Okay. So I see Jerry Gonzalez's hand up. We'll have questions from the council members, and then we'll open the public comments after that. Jerry.
Oh, okay. I guess Scott or Rod, getting asked by members of the community, given the governor's declaration and given what's happening down south, where we sit as far as being in a position of having to conserve, etc. And I kind of wanted you guys to kind of explain that, if possible.
Yeah, I could touch on that. We are, last year at this time, we were about 97% capacity, and we finished with about 40% at the end of the year. So just to put it in perspective, we're very close to the same capacity as we were last year. So at this time, the city doesn't anticipate any restrictions. Obviously, people want to pay attention to not wastewater. It's expensive when you do waste it. But in general, we're looking pretty good. We seem to be very fortunate in the situation we have established. We were able to also install the dam boards or the splash boards at Centennial a month and a half early than they usually allow us. So March 3rd they went in. It really helped getting that last rain after we put those in to top us off. As Rod stated earlier, that Centennial is actually overflowing the splash boards right now, which is filling up, adding some capacity to Morris. So overall, we're looking pretty solid for now.
Yeah, I would just add, and Scott, you were here in 2013, the winter of 2013 moving into 2014. The reservoirs were not filled to capacity, and the issue really presented itself when we didn't get rain until February of 2014. So the city is in a much different situation now with that level of storage in the reservoirs.
Okay, I saw Greta Connie, her hand's up. Go ahead.
Thank you. I just wanted to make sure I understood the last slide. So just let me say this and you tell me if this sounds right. It looks like the most conservative study of the groundwater capacity in Little Lake Valley was the one done in 1986, which indicated that there's roughly 35,000 acre-feet capacity in the valley. So essentially the valley holds up to 35,000 acre-feet of water. And when we look at the numbers of acre-feet actually used by the City of Willits water users in 2020, we were at under 1,000 acre-feet. And that's using both surface water treatment plant, groundwater treatment plant, and the park well. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay, so just for any of the general public or the media listening, I think that's a really important thing to note, that of the ultimate capacity of the valley, our users at last year used less than 1,000 acre-feet. So I think that's worth noting.
I'd just like to add for the public, if they don't know, an acre-foot of water is equivalent to 829 gallons. So if you want to do the math on that, it might not fit on your calculator.
Also, just for my benefit, does the groundwater basically recharges every year the same way our reservoirs do from the rainfall in the winter? So it isn't like when you take water out that's gone, that it recharges. Is that correct?
Yes, and the one estimate from I don't recall which study it was, that the groundwater would fully recharge with 75% of average annual rainfall. So that's, I don't know exactly what the average annual rainfall was in whatever year. I'd have to go back to that specific study, but that's how it works. And you have the first encounter groundwater, which is what the shallow wells use the first encounter groundwater, which is from the surface recharge, and then the confined aquifer is recharged at the edges of the valley, roughly.
And there's also not like just one big, huge reservoir. There's a lot of little sub aquifers within the valley. Is that also the case?
Essentially, yes. I don't profess to know exactly. It's hard to predict what's happening underground, and it could be different. It's just a small change in location could change what.
Okay. And any other questions or clarifications from council members?
Ed?
Yes, Larry.
Yes, this is Larry. I have three questions. First of all, I would like to know all of the depth of the 3 wells that we have, the 2 that are on pulling water, and tell me how deep they are so that the people out in the valley will understand what aquifer that we're pulling water from. Second, I would like to clarify that I was told a long time ago at one of the reports that we had that the water only gets into the aquifer just at the edge of the valley where it started to tip up to the mountains or hills and that's where the water goes. If it goes in the center of the valley, that's not anything that goes into the aquifer. And the next thing I would like to know is the water amount that is taken from the park well for the pumping into the trucks and whatever that are waiting in line to take the water out to wherever they take it. And that park well has been in a really long time, and I'm sure that the cone of depression and whatever is much larger than the new one, and the Elias well, and the one that hasn't been pumped yet at the Long 20. Thank you very much. If you could give me the depth of the wells, I'd appreciate that.
Yeah, so just to touch on that, the Elias well is approximately 180 feet deep, which is connected to the groundwater treatment plant. The Long 20 test well, Rod, what was the depth on that? Do you recall?
200 feet.
200 feet for that, and that's the Long 20 test well. The park well has been around for a long time, and it is 240 feet. The pump actually draws from about 175 feet.
Thank you very much.
So and they're all three screened below. I think the shallowest screening is 80 feet.
Correct.
So it's all below that, and there is the Department of Water Resources did a pump test on the park well. Sometime, I think it was in '86. Was it?
Correct. Yes.
And they pointed out that the wells that they monitored, and I will, the shallow wells around the park well, they monitored. Larry might be able to help us with the location of some of these, but that can come afterwards. But they monitored the well at TNT Salvage, and they monitored the well at Vanilla's property. And those shallow wells were not affected during that 6 days of pump testing because the DWR said it's pulling off a different aquifer. So that's the confined aquifer down below that roughly 60-foot layer. And it goes to your second question, Larry. That's exactly right. That aquifer is recharged at the edges of the valley, not directly over the middle of the valley.
Did that cover all your questions, Larry?
I'm trying to remember.
Yes, it did. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I have a question.
Yes, we're about to open it up to the public. Just a second. So, were there any other questions from council members? Greta.
Brian and I have talked about this at length, but it might be helpful to also have Scott and Rod weigh in on this. One of the biggest concerns that I think all the council members are getting from community members, both Willits residents and residents out in the valley, is the use of the park well water, particularly filling those water trucks, water going outside of our community. Because so many people in the valley, and perhaps it's because their wells are not as deep as the wells that the city is drawing from, but because so many people out in the valley are finding that their wells are lower, less producing, running dry, much before they historically have. There's a real concern that by the city drawing groundwater, we are putting the community at risk by basically tapping out that resource. I'm just asking for some clarification. I mean, clearly by these numbers, there's quite a big capacity in Little Lake Valley, so it seems unlikely that we could overdraw that. But can you clarify for any of the public who might be listening how that park well use is, within a reasonable quantity, or if we have any limits on how much we'll draw throughout the dry season.
So, going back to the DWR, the Department of Water Resources aquifer test that they did in 1986, they were of the opinion that pumping out of that park well would have no effect on shallow wells. It would only affect the wells that draw from that aquifer, essentially. And I think it's also important to point out that with that most conservative number of 35,000 acre feet, that's less than 100 feet in depth, and it doesn't include that 100 to 200 foot aquifer that we're talking about. That's depth down below that. So there's additional capacity that's not accounted for in that number.
This is Sabrina. Could I chime in real quick? A lot of the questions I have been asked. On that note, how many wells in the valley currently draw from the aquifer that the park well is drawing off of?
I don't know the answer to that question. I would have to research that.
Yeah, I'd like to get the answer because from what I'm hearing, it sounds like many of the wells may not, people complaining of their wells that may not pertain to them because the park well is deeper, but it sounds like maybe, in fact, there are others that are at a depth that this are drawing off of the same water source. So I'd like to get information, please.
Can I answer some of that?
Yes, go ahead, Larry. Larry?
The county has no idea how much water is being drawn out of the valley because they have no idea how deep they are or anything else or what they're drawing from. I've asked that question several times to the county and they have no idea. And I've asked Hatchcheck, our representative, and he has no idea. And they're pumping wells, they're drilling wells every day and out in the valley. And there's 18 rows just out in the valley, and there's probably more than that now. But each one of those has a water source, and the county's the one that's in charge of it, and they're not doing a really very good job. Thank you.
Thank you, Larry.
I wanted to tag on to that, and I think I just want to concur with Rod that, that would be and I think Larry nailed it on the head. Trying to track down that information would be a pretty extensive task, and I don't think it would give you the defined answers you're looking for. I think, as was communicated earlier in the presentation, that park well is pulling from an aquifer that is deeper than the shallow wells located within a reasonable proximity, and that's what was identified through the state's study efforts, and that's what we've been utilizing as kind of a baseline information.
Okay, thank you.
Quick follow-up question, Marisol. This is Sabrina. So if I was looking for that information, are you telling me that I wouldn't be able to call the county and they wouldn't have a list of permit holders for drilling a well at a depth beyond a certain depth?
I think that's what Larry is saying. He's been asking for that data and the county doesn't respond. Is that right, Larry?
They don't respond. They don't have it.
They don't have it. That's what I was told by the representative Hatchcheck, that there's people that are drilling wells, but they have no idea exactly what they're drawing from, how deep the well is, or any of these things. And so the people out in the valley are blaming the city, thinking that we're the ones that are drawing the water. We are not, because we haven't used the well this year to draw any water out of it for the city. And that's what people have to know. And that there's a clay level between each one of the different aquifers, which means that water that's in one aquifer with dip at the top has a layer of clay underneath it, and then it goes to another one, and then another one, and so on down. And I have no idea how much water is there and how many clay layers there are.
It would be interesting.
I just want to chime in again, and Rod, point this to you. What is the accountability for the county to maintain the well logs from the well drillers? They do it centrally, and is that a requirement?
It's my understanding that it is a requirement, and they issue all the well permits. I would just from my perspective, the mechanism here is the groundwater management plan, and it's a groundwater management plan that includes the county, where the county participates and provides the information. That goes going back to Greta's question. I don't think we completely answered. The only way to know, and even the only way to really better understand what's happening with the different wells in the valley and who's pumping what and where is to have a robust groundwater management plan that includes a robust monitoring component where there's data being reported and there's information, because we're speculating, we're what-ifing, we're looking at hypotheticals, and we don't know that there's actually any correlation between one well or another. I mean, we could talk about a bunch of different hypotheticals, but without having something in place where people are providing information and we're able to gather, not only because there's a water quality question that comes into this with the heavy metals being moved around by drawdown, etc., that we're imagining what could possibly happen, and what we need to do is actually get a better understanding and have a collaborative effort with the county and have some actionable items, some data that supports action rather than just wondering. Sorry. Go.
So Greta, go ahead, and then I'd like to open the public hearing pretty soon. So go ahead, Greta.
So just to your point, Rod, even if the county could provide us with the data on how many wells are out there in the valley, they're not metered, so they wouldn't even be able to tell us how much all of those well users are actually drawing, right? We don't have any idea. The county doesn't know how much water those residents and ag users are drawing.
Absolutely. Yes, that's correct. And the fundamental, it's more fundamental than the amount is the drawdown and recharge. Right, like how much. It doesn't matter how many millions of gallons are going out if there's no change in there's no impact to the groundwater level, right? I mean, but it does matter if we don't see recharge. You see that groundwater levels continue to draw down, but we don't know because we don't have. Or I think there are CASGEM wells out there. There are different data sources, and we've talked about monitoring wells. Park well monitoring wells that we can start to gather more information, but it's the more data points we have, the better understanding we'll get.
And I just want to carry on to that, and then we can open up. Is that the city? We pretty much know what the aquifers and the impact that we're having locally, and I think Larry described it very well. That geology and the hydrology in the surrounding area is very muddled. It's a very chaotic landscape, and both hydrology and recharge mechanisms. So what may be happening this couple mile or two outside our jurisdiction is going to be different on the other side of a ridge or on the side of a slope or something. That might be a entirely different aquifer, and it may be sealed from what we're actively in. So it's hard to tell. What is. You can't concur what is happening with the park well and then translate that to a site, a mile or two out. So just keep that in mind as well.
Okay, thank you. I would like to open it up to public comments. We can still come back to some more internal discussion after that. So I know that Judy Burtis was interested in talking. So Judy Burtis, you go ahead. You have 3 minutes. We will keep the timekeeper.
I can get all my questions in 3 minutes. It's the answers that I'm interested in here. I was interested in knowing, I hear that the potability of the well water. I hear that there's one well with a lot of boron. Boron is an insecticide or a fungicide. So which of the wells are potable water for our use other than gray water use? And the other thing I was wondering is how much water are we selling from the Park well or any other wells? Thank you. Oh, I wanted to mention one thing. Live Oak Road, which is not in the city limits, it's where I swim 3 times a week, has 3 huge growing, bigger every day, grow sites there. And they're all on wells out there. And the residents' wells are already endangered, and it's only May. So we have evidence from residents in the county saying they're having issues with their well water, cloudiness, because they're at the bottom of the aquifer. So, you can approach the well owners. I'm a well owner, and I monitor my well, and I'd be happy to share that and get data points on some kind of map. Thank you. Potable, and how much do we sell?
Ron, do you want to respond to those questions?
Yeah, I believe that Scott, I don't think we have a boron issue. I think there's the arsenic issue in the Park well.
Correct.
Yeah.
I'd have to look back on that.
So that's not potable?
No, it's untreated. So the Elias well that's being used has the zero non-detect for arsenic, and the Long 20 has this small concentration that's treatable with the groundwater treatment plant. And we propose to mix the Long 20 and the Elias well anyway to make it easier, basically diluting the concentration and making it easier to treat. There's a couple other options there. In the city sold 8 million gallons last year and 1.1 million gallons the prior year out of Parkwell.
Can anyone who's not currently speaking turn off their or put themselves on mute? I'm getting a lot of feedback because there look to be multiple people with their lines open. Thank you.
Good idea. Is there prior years before 2019 from the Parkwell, or how long have we been selling truckloads of water from there to just see if there's between 19 and 20, it looks like quite a big increase. Just wondering about that.
Yeah, that's correct, Matt. This is Scott. I believe, Rod, it was 2016 that Park well for the truck fill station was installed. Not the well itself, but the truck fill station apparatus. And the first couple years was really nothing. I believe, I can go back and look, I don't even know if we have that, but 19 and 20, or 19 is when it started to pick up, and then this last year, it was our biggest year yet.
And those truckers know that this is not potable water, so it's only being trucked for uses other than household, right?
Correct.
Okay.
I'd like to speak. This is Bear Kameroff.
Yes, Bear Kameroff, go ahead, your turn.
Yeah, I'm concerned very much about the Long 20 well, which you say has treatable arsenic. I really don't know what you mean by treatable, because as I understand, it's virtually impossible to get arsenic down to zero, and that a lot of what I'm reading of studies is that the federal arsenic levels have been increased in recent years, not because they found it safe, but because the water treatment plants can't afford to bring it down. And right now we have a city water system where there's zero arsenic, zero poison in our water, and we're about to mix a well with arsenic down to very low levels, but arsenic just the same, into our city water, which, considering that the Long Truddy well right now is not needed to keep our city in water, but maybe as a backup, but to add it as a regular water supply makes absolutely no sense at all to me. I mean, here's a town where we're trying to attract people. We don't have a lot to offer, but some of the things we do offer the world is we have clean water along with clean air and virtually no street crime that people should be afraid of. And now we're going to be able to tell the world, well, we have arsenic, but it's treatable. I think this is a very foolish move to add any arsenic to our city water. And I would like to say that I really hope that you reconsider that. Thank you.
Thank you. Any comments about the treatability, or shall we go on with other public comments first?
Go ahead, Scott.
You go ahead, Rod.
Well, I was gonna defer to you on the limit is 10, isn't it? 10 micrograms.
Correct.
And the concentration is 28 micrograms. And what we've actually talked about doing, because it's primarily from that lower, the bottom of the lower portion of the well, is where we got the highest concentration, was just sealing that off and trying to eliminate as much from the source as possible. Our expectation is to get it to undetected. So what is it, Scott? Co-precipitation. Precipitate it out with the iron. It actually is removed through the filter media.
So you plan not to use that well until you know you have non-detectable arsenic, or you plan to use it anyway?
Go ahead, Scott.
Yeah. So, Bear, this is Scott. So the State Water Resource Control Board, essentially, they will come and do pilot tests. They said, do not introduce anything into your system until we come and do a pilot test and approve that you can put that water into your system. So I just want you to know that we're being regulated by them. They're telling us what we can and can't do with that.
Yeah, and I think Bear wants to make it clear that the standard that they're holding us to may not be high enough standard for his preferences or for the public's preference. So I think it's a valid concern to, how low can we, what's acceptable isn't necessarily just what the State Water Quality Control Board holds us to. Is that right?
If you're talking to me, yeah, that's right. But considering the fact that if you could use that well as a backup emergency and then warn people in the city maybe to go buy water, then it would make a lot more sense to add it in just normally when right now we don't really need it, and introduce that arsenic into our water, which I think is a huge mistake if you do it. Anyway, thanks for your time. Appreciate your listening to me.
Yeah, thank you, Bear. Other comments from the public or questions? Anyone else here would like to address this informational item? By the way, just so you know, the council will be looking at the actual proposal to develop that well probably later this year. And please ask Kathy Moorhead or our engineering department to put you on the list if you'd like to know when that hearing will happen. We're not making a decision this evening about that. The one thing that is on our agenda for tonight is a slight increase in the studies needed to bring that development even up to a point where we can make a decision. That's my understanding anyway.
Another one if I can.
Yes, Judy, you can have a follow-up question.
First of all, I'd like to make a statement that I think I would love there to be some monitoring of the wells that are in this valley, and especially since they just allowed more acreage for cannabis use, I think that we're in a very dangerous position for our potable water in the valley. I think we should do a survey of the wells with the drawdown and the use and the refill rates from people that are tracking it themselves or other agencies. And the second thing is I want to tell a story briefly about my time in LA. I lived in North Hollywood. They were capping something in the intersection by my house, and I said, "What are you doing?" They said, "We're capping a well because there's too much cancer-causing toxins in it." 5 years later, they were uncapping it, and I said, "Oh, have you cleaned the well?" They said, "No, the state has changed the standards. So now they're allowing more cancerous toxins in our water, so we're opening it up and giving the water to your neighborhood with cancer toxins in it." I don't want that to happen here. I moved here to get away from that. And it's alarming to hear about the arsenic. It's alarming to hear about the boron, and that you're mixing it without the real need to mix it just to get people used to tasting different water. Alarms me, and it makes me want to go look for land in, I don't know, where can we go and live now? Anyway, thank you.
Can I clarify, Madge, just so it doesn't, there's no boron in the, and there's no arsenic, there's no boron in the Elias well that I'm aware of. Scott, correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah, not that I'm aware of either. I'd have to go, I haven't looked at those results in forever, so I'd have to go back and look at the Alpha Lab results. But
well, yeah.
We do have that.
I mean, there's boron, but there's nothing. There's no high concentration of boron in well water that.
Madge?
Yes, Larry, go ahead.
Brad, I think you were here when Tom Mannert we were drilling a pilot well, and we took a survey of every level of water that we pumped and we got to, and we as a city, when we came to putting in the Elias well or next to the Elias well, we capped off all of the ones that were bad, and that's why there's no arsenic or anything else in the Elias well. That's the reason why, and that's the same thing that happens with all of them. And you just cap that particular portion of it off and that particular stream of the aquifer, and then you just keep it clean. There's just no way that the dirty water can get in. And that was done years ago, and I think probably, Rod, you were in on that when Tom Mannert was here. Thank you.
Yes, I was. That's why the well was limited. We stopped at 180 feet. It didn't go beyond that. That's exactly correct.
Are there any other members of the public who would like to have a word with us about this item? And I'm not hearing anybody come forth. Any other questions or comments from council members before we move along? I have one comment. Anybody else?
I have a comment. I'm sorry.
Judy, I think you might be over your 3 minutes, but if it's real short, just go ahead.
I think it's important to monitor the well water use in our area, in our valley. And I'm alarmed that this county's not doing it and the city isn't doing it. And we're inviting multinational grows into our area. I just don't see a good outcome of doing that without knowing exactly how much water we have, how much water is used, and how much water we need. So I really hope that somebody can do a survey of the well use or something. Thank you.
Thank you, Judy. Well, that was going to, and Jerry, and then I'll make my comment too, which was what Judy was covering. Jerry.
Actually, this is more kind of a response to Judy. They basically say, Judy, I think you need to pressure county officials. City deals with the city, and we try to do the best stewardship we can, but ultimately, I I really think the county needs to do their job.
So my comment was actually along those same lines, and that is that the county and the Regional Water Quality Control Board or the State Water Board, that's their responsibility, their jurisdiction, they have authority. The city doesn't, and we have no control over any of that, the grows outside city limits, etc. So we are doing the very best we can to be very responsible citizens within the city and our impact on anything outside the city. But the stuff going on outside of the city limits, we can't monitor them or change them or give them permits or anything else. So the fact that the county isn't keeping records, isn't monitoring the water boards, I think we, the city and the citizens individually, but the city, I would like us to write to the county and the water board saying, in order for us to be good citizens, we want to know what's going on in the valley with all of these wells that are sticking straws into the same aquifers that a lot of people depend on for their drinking water. And we don't want to, I don't think our straw is overdrawing the supply here from the city, but what's going on out there in the surrounding area is quite alarming, and I agree with Judy about that. And I would like to propose that we write a letter on behalf of the city that we expect good tracking and monitoring and permitting requirements so that everybody has to be a good citizen with the use of water. Greta?
I just wanted to make a comment in response to a couple of the comments made regarding arsenic and boron and the fears of safety of our water. And I wanted to point out that California has among the most stringent water quality control standards in the country, and the city of Willits meets all of those state standards. I, for one, have a high level of confidence in Scott and the staff at the water treatment plant, and I believe that were chemicals like arsenic found, they would take every effort to ensure that that was not mixed into our municipal water system at an unsafe level. So I feel that confidence, and I hope the general public does as well.
It's also my understanding that we are not going to heavily rely on either of the Elias or the potential future Long 20 well for our routine daily capacity that we need to serve the city. The reservoirs are our primary source, and there are times when mixing the water from the wells with the reservoir water makes sense, because towards the end of summer the reservoir water can be harder to treat and gets warm, and there's certain difficulties there. So it's nice to be able to mix and supplement our water supply, but that we didn't. My understanding, and we aren't intending to use like 50-50 percentage of the water that we use in the city from the wells. And one other thing is that, on the other hand, if we didn't have access to the reservoir water, if there was an earthquake, took out our pipeline or something, it would be really essential to have a backup emergency system. So there's, the mixing is only part of the reason to make sure we have a backup system. Is that fairly accurate, Rod?
Just unmute. Yes. That was the purpose, to provide a secondary source that was identified in the 2006 report by West Yost as a potential issue for the city. And in 2014, we had to go through the emergency drought situation and work really fast to get the well online, and the purpose of having a second well for redundancy and additional supply is just to avoid that in the future. For like we've talked about many times, there's a single pipe connecting the surface water treatment plant to the city. And if anything were to happen to that pipe for whatever reason, fire, landslide, seismic event, vandalism, or something at the treatment plant, pumps go out. It's prudent, fiduciary. It's like comes to the duty to have that secondary source, so that you can continue to supply water. There's no intention of it being the primary source. It's always, especially in a situation like this, we talked about flushing and the importance of flushing for water quality. Given the dry conditions, that would be a very good time to use the groundwater treatment plant, the groundwater system, to supplement the city's water. I would just point out real quickly, just the pilot testing for arsenic is part of the project. That's part of the groundwater project. It is identified as important, and I would also point out, Greta was right on point with the state of California's requirements. So the World Health Organization health goals is 5 micrograms per liter, and so we would expect to achieve that with the treatment process, or whatever steps are taken with the long 20 system.
Okay. Do any other council members want to support the idea of a letter to the county and the water boards urging that we have adequate monitoring of what's going on with our wells out in the valley outside the city's jurisdiction? Anybody think that's a good idea?
I'm Larry. I definitely do.
So I would hope that staff can work that into your busy schedules. And that would come back to the council, right? Assuming. Okay. If there are no other comments on this item, we're going to go to the next item on our agenda. 9B is the groundwater. What was that?
I was just saying thank you, Scott Rod, for the presentation.
Yes, yeah, that was very helpful. Okay, so 9B is the groundwater project contract amendment number 2, and I think Andrea Trincado-Slater is going to be one of the presenters on this item. Andrea, are you there?
Yes, thank you. As the city engineer and public works director discussed during the last presentation, the city has been working on improving its groundwater infrastructure with a groundwater improvement project. LACO is currently under contract to complete preliminary engineering work to prepare the project for construction. Part of these tasks include completing the environmental and permitting phases of the project. These phases, for a number of reasons, have been far more work than what was originally anticipated. This work includes the preparation of an initial study, mitigated negative declaration, conducting biological and botanical assessments, hosting a number of public meetings, and now they are tasked with further revising the initial study as a response to the public comments that were received. Due to the increased level of effort necessary to complete these tasks, LACO is requesting a contract amendment for $44,233.50. Sufficient funds were budgeted this fiscal year to cover the cost of the contract amendment, and the grant, Proposition 1 grant funds will reimburse the city for about $55,000 worth of the work. And with that, I'll open up to see if you guys have any questions.
Okay, thank you, Andrea. Any questions from the council members before we open the hearing? And I don't see or hear any, so this is a public hearing. If anyone in the public would like to ask a question or comment on this item, which is on the agenda. I see. Do I hear anybody out there would like to comment? No, doesn't look like it. So closing the public hearing and bring it back up to the council. Jerry, go ahead.
I would like to move staff recommendations.
Thank you. Anyone ready to second that motion?
I am, Larry.
Okay, moved by Councilmember Gonzalez and seconded by Mary Stransky. If there are no further comments, we will have a roll call vote. Kathy?
Councilmember Gonzalez.
Yes.
Tawny.
Yes.
Stransky.
Yes.
Rodriguez.
Yes.
Mayor Strong.
Yes. Okay. We are now on City Council committee, boards, and agency reports. Let's just, I'll just call on people if you have any reports. Sabrina, would you like to go first?
Sure. MTA met today, and we had discussions about the safety of returning to public transit and marketing plan, just to reassure the public that it is safe to ride on public transportation. MTA is struggling with getting staff back to work. If you know anybody in any city in Mendocino County that's looking to become a driver, we're in need of those. They can go to the Mendocino Transit Authority website and click on the link and apply there. And we're also planning, in an effort to try and get ridership up again, we're planning some free rides that will take place in the month of September. And last thing was just simply that I went for a tour with Sean Payne from the water department. Last year we went and looked at the water and the wastewater treatment plant, and yesterday I had the pleasure of going around and looking at all of our pump stations and water towers and looking at the infrastructure and the potential for maybe short-term and long-term upgrades. That's all I have.
Okay, thank you. How about Jerry Gonzalez? Do you have any reports?
Today I sat in on the League of Cities legislative, they call it legislative days, but we met with Congressman or Assemblyman Wood and the different folks in the different committees. I'm on the Public Safety Committee, and there's a couple of bills. One of them is SB 2, which is police officer decertification. I think everybody backs. I think what they want is for them to have conversations with police chiefs. He does, because there's some stripping of some basically qualified immunity, but it would potentially bankrupt the city and them. And I don't think it's been well thought out. And so we're really asking, the league is asking, to take it back to the drawing board, because it has the potential to really hurt small cities. So that was one thing. And I also, LAPCO had a meeting this week, and I think Dusty was on there. That's all.
Okay, thank you. Larry Stransky.
I have nothing, thank you.
Okay. Greta Connie.
Thank you. Last week I attended MCOG meeting. The new, I don't know if Dusty Dooley is on this call. The last thing that We were told at the MCOG meeting was that the pedestrian safety enhancements that are due to be installed at the Highway 20 Blosser intersection are now delayed with no date. They had some difficulty getting parts, and so the project has been put on hold. But I was recently riding my bicycle over there, and it looks that they are doing something. So I don't know if Dusty has any information on that. Are you there, Dusty?
Councilmember Connie, this is Dusty Dooley, Community Development Director for the city. I don't have any information, but let me see what I can find out, and I can provide an update to the council if I get any new information.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
The other thing that I wanted to report from MCOG is that I just wanted to make the council aware of this. It turns out that statewide gas tax revenues are steadily decreasing as vehicles become more fuel efficient and also as more drivers switch to electric vehicles. It's making transportation planning a little bit challenging for this state, especially looking forward. So they're looking at some new strategies to raise funds for transportation projects. And because so many of our transportation projects depend on those funds, it's important for cities and municipalities to be looking at how they're going to make up for that shortfall that will continue. So just wanted to get that in your heads. The other board that I attended was Museum Advisory Board this morning. Just to reiterate, I made this announcement last time, the museum is now open to the public. They are free on the first Saturday of each month, so I encourage community members to go out and check out the museum. They've done an astounding job during the shutdown, especially working on the collection and the condition of the collection to make it more available to the public. If people want to do research, if people want to use an image that the museum holds for a project, for educational purposes, they're finding ways to make those accessible to people and getting a bulk of the materials available online. So anyone who's interested should check out the county's website and look at Past Perfect, which is a new program that the museum is using to make the archives and materials more accessible to all members of Mendocino County. That's all I have.
Thank you. I have two agencies that I am reporting on. One is that Economic Development Financing Operation will be meeting tomorrow at 2. And there's a new hire who's a development coordinator, and they're kind of shifting to a shared leadership instead of having just a single executive director. We're doing some kind of a hybrid there, and so I think that'll be interesting. But they are definitely open for business and doing a lot of loans to the entrepreneurs. And the other meeting will be a week later. That was tomorrow. And the following Thursday, which is the 20th, in the morning at 10, is the Mendocino Solid Waste Management Authority, otherwise known as Mendo Recycle. And that's our regular monthly meeting. And I had one other report, which I guess actually morphs into item 11. I'll just go ahead and do it since I've got the floor at the moment. And that is that I noticed that State Senator McGuire is holding two community meetings. One is Monday, May 17th at noon, and the other one is Thursday, May 27th at 6:30. And these are basically looking at our wildfire preparedness, especially in our region of the state, where we have really dire fire conditions going on this year, coming up much sooner in the year than they have in the past, and much scarier scenarios. So I think those two community meetings are definitely open to the public and will be quite informative. So I think I've sent a copy of that to the city offices, and I hope that will be posted on the website. And any other council member reports or recommendations?
Madge, can I ask you a question about recycling?
Sure.
I don't know if you saw the Facebook post from Solid Waste of Willits. They're continuing to have a problem with homeowners who are not properly sorting their recyclables into their blue bin, and it's causing contamination. They indicated that they don't want to have to raise the rates, so what they're going to start doing is basically charging extra fees to those households who continue to put out contaminated blue bins. And if that doesn't stop the behavior, they will remove the blue bins and no longer provide recycling service to those households. I wonder if your agency that deals with recycling could maybe think about doing some sort of marketing push, education push to remind the public on how to properly use their blue bins so that we can all keep this valuable service and not have to pay more for it.
Good comment. Yes, I think that's, I would definitely bring that up at the Recycle meeting a week from tomorrow, and I'm pretty sure they're aware of it, and I hope we will, do some real public outreach. I agree with you totally, Greta. Thank you. And by the way, it's also somewhat equally important that people make use of their green bins for food waste and garden waste and so forth, because that becomes a usable resource instead of going into the landfill, and it reduces the rates for everybody if that can be maximized instead of putting those valuable resources into your garbage. They go into the green bin and they get turned into compost, which is great. So both the recycling and the green bins are a very critical benefit to us. Actually, one of the problems we have at Mendo Recycle is not alone, and that is that a lot of the supposedly recyclable materials are becoming more and more difficult to actually recycle because China closed their doors and so forth. But they're doing the very best they can, and that's the haulers and our Mendo Recycle and statewide are all trying to do the best they can, but recycling has been challenging. Okay, so that I think we've done. Any other reports or recommendations on other matters from council members? Not seeing or hearing any. Any good and welfare? Chief, yes, Chief Lizarraga, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Just to kind of give the council and community a heads up, there was a meeting today from the county regarding, there's going to be an exercise on the 26th, which is the day of the next council meeting, so I thought I'd bring it up today. It's going to be from 12 to 1, and basically it's a test of the wireless emergency alert system, being called WIA. And the county is going to be basically putting out an alert for those people that have signed up on Nixle and also through the Nextdoor app. And it's basically a test, and they want to test the system, and then afterward take a survey of those that got the notification that it was a test to see how well the system is working, how widespread the notifications went, and then obviously to encourage people to sign up for the alerts. There's going to be a press release that's put out, I believe, around the 24th or so, or that week of, and outlining what exactly the test is going to entail. So we'll ourselves and Ukiah and Fort Bragg and the Sheriff's Office will all anticipate getting some calls from people wanting to know what's going on. But it is going to be very clear on the notification that it is a test alert. It also will have a link provided for people to get more information. But as we get closer, we'll put stuff out on our on the website for city and the police department, as well as our Facebook page. But and then if we get any more information that you need to know about beforehand, I'll funnel it through Brian. So, but I wanted to get that out and let you guys know as soon as possible, since we won't be meeting again until after the test.
Yeah. What is the website for people to sign up for the Nixle alert system? Is it just NIXLE or EL?
If you go to the Mendocino, you can sign up through the website for Willits and the police department for the city of Willits. But you can also sign up for under the sheriff's office for NIXO alerts.
Okay, thank you. Okay, looks like we can close the open part of the meeting. And we will now have a closed session. Let's give ourselves a few minutes, maybe 5 minutes maximum. And then we'll convene with just the closed session, which is pursuant to Government Code 54957, public employee performance evaluation of the city manager. And this is the 4-month review that we had built into our contract with our new city manager, Brian Bender, to have a 4-month evaluation. And I believe that is all we need to announce. And so the city council members, please reconvene on our closed session in 5 minutes. Thank you very much.